guys, this is your next Q&A. Like I always say, if I didn't get you on this one, I'll try to get you on the next one. This is gonna be a 3-part Q&A, so it's still running. If you guys got any more questions, put them in the comments. We'll find them. So let's get straight to it. AC Ibarra wants to know, looking back after all these years with hindsight being 2020, do you believe that Fresno or the Fresno car, the Bulldogs, had a valid reason to break off from the Norte? In my personal opinion, no, I don't think that there was a valid reason for Fresno to break off and eventually become a mortal enemy to the rest of the Norte. The conflict wasn't with Fresno itself, it was with some of the more influential NF members from Fresno themselves, like Eddie Crackers Vindiola, who was at odds with the NF leadership. Crackers and others then used their influence to start their own movement in Fresno that opposed the NF and its following. In my opinion, this was wrong, and it was a degenerate move because Crackers and some of the others that were directly involved shouldn't have allowed their personal issues to spill over and create the type of division that it did. Being the type of strong-willed, dedicated believers that I know Crackers and some of these other C's once were, I just would have thought that they would have placed more concern on the well-being of the collective rather than to see the division that they created on a mass scale like it did. Was it really about preserving Fresno's best interests and preserving Fresno's integrity as a separate entity? Or was it self-serving for Crackers and the others who were caught up in their personal dilemmas? Again, I think it was a reckless and selfish move, as it didn't appear as if they really gave this much concern either way. When I was in a similar situation in the Santa Clara County Jail, I could have created a power struggle between the old jail and the new jail. I had enough influence within the jail, and there was a lot of young NR members who were caught up in the crossfire. This was obviously on a much smaller scale, but it was the same type of concept and it had the same type of negative effect on the collective. But I wasn't that selfish, and even though I was going through my issues, I still didn't want to create a small war in the jail, and I still cared enough to avoid all that. At the time, there was a lot of young NR members in the jail that had either known me from prison or who had worked underneath me on the streets. So I had the influence within the jail, but I chose not to use it like that. For argument's sake, let's just say that the reason Crackers and the other C's from Fresno felt like they had justifiable reasons for influencing the split and for creating that division. That would have been one thing. But where did the bad blood come from? Why was there a war? And why did Fresno become a movement that had objectives that were specifically opposed to the Norteño Alliance? Bottom line, Crackers and the others who had that influence used that influence for personal reasons and completely disregarded what type of effect it would have ultimately had on the entire Norteño collective. Not only that, but they turned it into a personal conflict using false propaganda and deception. So Cloudy NS wants to know, did world history, governments, secret societies, fraternities ever interest you? Or did you ever read about some of those subjects in lockup? Or meet anyone in said fraternities? Freemasons? Second part of his question, the truth is that there is only a limited set of outcomes that can come about from joining a gang. For the vast, they aren't good outcomes. It is what it is. Live and let live. Yes, for the most part, that was the type of literature or reading material that I took an avid interest in. I only read books that I could get something out of. Books on philosophy, history, world politics, revolutionary-inspired books, Middle Eastern philosophy, law enforcement tactics, psychology, and other books all geared towards self-improvement, i.e. Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power, building leadership skills, how to identify someone's tics, etc., etc. There was a brief time during the early 90s when I was doing short parole violations in Pelican Bay SHU that I started reading novels from authors like Dean Koontz and Stephen King. But I stopped reading novels and only focused on reading books that I could get something out of. Other than that, I also took an interest in other literature about conspiracy theories and secret societies, as you mentioned. I can't say I've ever met someone who actually belonged to a secret fraternity though. As to the second part of your question, which is more along the lines of a statement, I agree. For the vast majority who get involved in that lifestyle, there is no future in joining gangs. Those paths are already set, and anyone who thinks that they're different, that they're exempt from the penalties, or that they got it all figured out is only in a state of perpetual denial. Like the rest of us, you'll eventually fall victim to the same set of circumstances, or you'll become prey to the nefarious politics at some point in your so-called career. For anyone who still remains a part of that aimless existence and who still has a chance to remove themselves before they succumb to those consequences, they should. And if they were smart, they take heed and learn from those who have fallen before you. So Real Bafa wants to know, what do you think about UFC now and men fighting women? I'm a fan of the UFC, despite the fact that I still like old school top ranked boxing. I've got family who I grew up watching boxing with, uncles and cousins, and they have a real skewed way of looking at the UFC. In their perspectives, it's all about the technical aspects of boxing and how true boxers can't rely on nothing else but their raw boxing skills. They can't go to the ground for ground and pound if the jab ain't working. Or they can't go for an armbar or a headlock if something else ain't working. Like they would say, UFC is for pussies. But I don't agree with that. UFC is the closest to modern day gladiator fighting as you're gonna get. A full contact body sport where fists, elbows, knees, and every other body part is part of your arsenal. They're two different sports with two different skill sets, so I'm a UFC fan. As far as men fighting women, no disrespect to the ladies, but I don't agree with it. Let's keep it real. For the most part, men are stronger than women, and they're just physically superior. Genetically speaking, how would you even begin to fairly match fights between men and women? No doubt, I'm sure there's a lot of women out there who have hearts big enough to get in the cage with anyone. And there might even be some that'll whoop the average fool's ass. But generally speaking, I just don't think fighting men against women could ever be a sport that could be regulated and watched with any real measure of fairness or sincerity. So, Cuner J wants to know, in general, gangs further their objectives by selling their doctrines, policies, goals, beliefs, rules, and regulations, etc., under the guise of betterment to their race and far in the distance payoffs. Sacrifice your life, freedom, all those you love and everything you care about for us, and we'll give you nothing in return. Obviously, these top dogs are intelligent. They get hunters to buy into the dream. However, why is it that nobody promotes the idea of all these followers to become educated, knowledgeable, savvy, and or skilled in law, stock market, banking, corporate America, international business, where the money is much greater and business is handled in broader arenas instead of doing business benefits literally in the streets? Wouldn't that be the gang's mantra? Wouldn't that be working smarter, not harder? You're absolutely correct. That's what the cause used to be founded on, but all that no longer exists now. So you're absolutely correct. Criminal organizations, prison gangs, or street gangs do sell their doctrines, goals, ideas, and beliefs. They do this by systematically spreading hyped up false forms of propaganda, gaining new members through recruitment, and bringing in new potential prospects is dependent on this. This is especially true in this day and age we live in, where everything is visual, where social media is the new way of marketing, advertising, promoting, communicating, and recruiting. Gangs use social media as a recruiting tool by showing their guns, money, power, and muscle. This is what appeals to the youngsters who see it. And this is what reels them in. They see these tough-looking guys in nice cars or on nice motorcycles with guns, stacks of money, and surrounded by beautiful girls. Of course, this is appealing and cool to the youngsters who see it, and they want to be a part of it. They want the cars, the women, the money, and the power. All the things you mentioned in this question or statement sound like a description of what criminal organizations should consist of. You have some of the recruitment tactics, then you go to the pitch of what the gang or criminal organization is about. The philosophy and ideology, as you mentioned, those special few at the top who sit back and reap all the benefits. This is exactly how these criminal organizations work, or should work. At any rate, you pose some good questions about why certain things aren't pursued, why certain things aren't implemented, and why things aren't done to improve or advance these groups. That's the magic question. Some of this stuff is obvious, and these are questions that continue to be asked, whether it's a lack of vision, a lack of care, or a lack of priority. This is why there's no advancement, and this is why there's no forward progress. These are just some of the questions And a lot of them are actually the more trivial questions that have been asked. We're 20 years into the new millennium, and some of these organizations haven't progressed much since they evolved. It's not about staying afloat or maintaining. It's supposed to be about advancement, growing, prospering, and finding new cutting-edge ways to continue growth. But believe it or not, most of these organizations bear responsibility for stumping its own growth and for sabotaging its own forward progress. So East Oakland Dirty 30s wants to know, if you were an active gang member, we know your spill would be way different. What would it be like if you were active and able to speak on YouTube? Honestly, I wouldn't even be on YouTube. Not because I would have thought I was too good or anything like that. I just had a completely different mindset when I was active. I wouldn't say it had anything to do with paranoia, but I was a lot more security conscious. And I think this also made me a lot more reserved. It's also a big no-no to delve off into politics or anything else along those lines. So I probably would have just avoided YouTube or other types of social media. There's a lot of people on YouTube who profess to be active, or at least they claim they are. And they know that this limits them insofar as things they can openly discuss. Yet they straddle the fence and still try to talk about certain things they have no business talking about. As an active gang member, I wouldn't have respected that, and this is something I would have frowned upon. So I wish I could give you an example of some tamed down version of how I would have represented myself on YouTube if I would have still been active. But like I said, I wouldn't have been on YouTube providing any type of open dialogue either way. So at most, I would have just been spectating like the rest of you. So 480 C-Town AZ wants to know, do you have a video about your story, your past gang life? What was your highest position in the organization? I'm from AZ, and my boy Cricket from Prison Chronicles spoke good about you. Nah, C-Town AZ, the only videos I have about my story is the ones you'll find right here on YouTube. I'm sure you're probably already aware of this, but then I also wrote a book I authored titled Nuestra Familia, A Broken Paradigm. As far as my previous status within the organization, let me just put it like this. I took my directives directly from the three generals. Right before I got arrested in 2004, when I was the assigned RC, Regimental Commander, for the San Jose Regiment, I was basically in line to be assigned the overall street administrator for most of the regiments in the Bay Area, from Salinas back down to Santa Rosa. I was already handling a lot of personal issues for Corny, Pinky, and Tibbs. But one of the main reasons for appointing me this position was because they wanted to rein in all the different lines of communication that were spread out and causing too much heat. In other words, there were too many different RCs sending their own visitor to the Glenn Dyer Federal Detention Facility in Oakland to pull Corny, Pinky, or Tibbs out, and it was causing too much unwanted attention. This was how each regiment was reporting, and this was critical. However, they wanted to consolidate all the visitors by using just one designated visitor, and they wanted one regiment to take a lead role to assist with this. So this just gives you an idea as to how I was functioning out there, and just an example of one position I was appointed. As for your boy Cricket, I have nothing but positive things to say about him as well. He was one of the first individuals I did a podcast with when I was with Loaded News Media. If you're still in touch with him, please do extend my embracements as well as my best to him. I hope you guys have enjoyed this Q&A. There's still one more part of this 3-part Q&A, so look for that to drop sometime next week. On another note, we have more calls from behind the walls dropping, so stay tuned for that. Red Rum is going to be talking about the history of 2-5ers, so check it out. Also, just another quick heads up. YouTube still ain't showing us no love when it comes to sending out notifications. So go to our community page and periodically check from time to time to see if we posted any release times for any of our upcoming content. For those of you who are interested in participating in our next shoe raffle, start getting your tickets in now. $3 buy-ins, and there's no limit on tickets. Also, because everybody's feeling the strain at the pump right now, PMN will be giving away several prepaid gas cards to raffle runner-ups. Good luck and congrats to all 6 of our last winners. Pictures of them can be seen on our community page. In closing, as always, we just want to thank all our viewers, all those that continue to support us, all those that continue to believe in us, and all those who have helped us grow. Without you, the viewers, we would cease to exist.